The Promeson, a distant human colony, far from Earth. There was a quiet farming village surrounded by endless golden fields. The villagers lived a simple life, growing food and trading with travelers who came from other colonies. Above them, in the sky, the shadow of ancient alien ruins floated like a silent guardian, a massive structure left behind by a race long gone. People in the village were used to it, but sometimes children would stare at it and wonder what secrets it held. Among these children was a boy named Ethan, only 10 years old, with messy brown hair and bright, curious eyes. He spent his days helping his parents in the fields, carrying baskets, chasing stray animals, and dreaming about ships and adventures. Beyond the colony, one summer morning, his peaceful life changed when a caravan of research ships landed near the village. They were scientists, studying the alien ruins, and among them was a girl named Lyra. She was a little older than Ethan, maybe 14. With dark hair tied back and eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 questions. Ethan met her by accident, when he saw her struggling to carry a heavy scanner across the rocky path. Without thinking, he ran to help. At first, she laughed and said she could manage, but she let him walk beside her. They started talking, and Ethan learned that she had traveled to many worlds with her family. Searching for clues about the alien builders, she spoke about planets with red skies, oceans of glass, and forests that glowed at night. Ethan listened with wide eyes, feeling like the universe had suddenly opened its doors to him. In the days that followed, they became friends. They explored the grassy hills, shared fresh fruit, and sat under the shade of the old communication tower. Lyra told him stories of Earth, of blue oceans, green mountains, and the tall shining cities that humans had left behind when they moved to the stars. For Ethan, Earth was just a word from history lessons. But the way she described it made it sound like magic. One afternoon, while they sat on a wooden fence watching the sunset, Ethan asked her a question. "Will you stay here?" Lyra smiled sadly and shook her head. "My parents will leave in a few weeks," she said. "We have more ruins to study on other worlds." Ethan felt a strange ache in his chest, the kind he had never felt before. He didn't want her to go. She was different from anyone he had ever met, smart, brave, and full of dreams bigger than the sky. The thought of her leaving scared him, and before he could stop himself, the words came out. "When I grow up, I will marry you," he said, his voice trembling but full of determination. Lyra turned her head sharply, surprised, then she laughed softly, not in a mean way, but in the way someone laughs when they hear something pure and unexpected. "That's a big promise, Ethan," she said. "I mean it," he replied, gripping the fence as if it could hold his promise in place. She studied him for a moment, and instead of answering, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small pendant. It was made of a strange metal, smooth and warm to the touch, with markings like tiny stars. "I found this near the ruins," she said, placing it in his hand. "Keep it safe, and remember this summer." Ethan closed his fingers around it, feeling the weight of the gift. It wasn't just a pendant, it was a piece of her world. Something no one else in the village had. The next morning, the research ships were ready to leave. Ethan stood near the landing area, holding the pendant tightly. Lyra waved at him from the ramp, and for a moment, he thought she might run back to stay. But she only smiled, the kind of smile that hides both sadness and hope, before disappearing into the ship. The engines roared, dust and wind filled the air, and then she was gone. Ethan stayed there long after the sky was empty, the promise echoing in his heart. He didn't know how or when, but one day, he would see her again. And when that day came, he would keep his word. Years of silence, years passed like waves rolling quietly across a dark ocean. Ethan was no longer the small boy who stood in the dusty wind watching a ship take Lyra away. He had grown taller, stronger, and the softness of his childhood face had been replaced with the sharp focus of someone who had seen danger. The pendant she had given him still hung around his neck, worn smooth by years of restless fingers. It had become more than a memory, it was a compass pointing to a future he still believed in. The peaceful days of the colony did not last. From deep space came whispers of a threat, an alien species moving closer to human borders. At first, it was only talk, but then colonies began to vanish from communication channels. Ships disappeared without a trace, and trade routes turned into dangerous traps. When recruitment officers came, asking for skilled pilots, Ethan stepped forward without hesitation. Not because he loved war, but because he wanted to see the stars. And somewhere, out there, among those countless worlds, he believed Lyra was still walking under the same sky. Training was harsh. He learned to fly small fighter crafts, navigate asteroid fields, and outmaneuver enemy drones in the black void. His squadron became his second family, bound together by the silent understanding that each day could be their last, but even in the cold emptiness of space, when all he could see were distant suns and enemy shadows, the pendant reminded him of summer fields and a girl who spoke about oceans of earth. The war dragged on, growing darker with each cycle. Ethan's skills earned him a place among the fastest interceptor pilots in the fleet. His missions took him far beyond the safe zones, to places where space itself seemed to press in on the ship like a living thing. He saw cities burning on frozen moons, heard the last broadcasts of dying colonies, and once even flew past the shattered remains of a research vessel, a scene that made his stomach twist because it reminded him of her. Still, there were moments of hope. Travelers from distant colonies sometimes spoke of caravans of scientists, moving from world to world, studying ruins just like the ones near his home. Each time, Ethan would ask the same question. Was there a girl with them? Dark hair, eyes like the night sky. Most shook their heads. Some said they thought they had seen someone like her, but the trail always faded before he could follow it. One day, after a long patrol in a quiet sector near the outer rim, Ethan sat alone in the hangar, staring at the stars through the open launch bay. It was strange how the galaxy could feel endless and yet empty. He had traveled farther than most in the fleet, fought in battles that carved scars into planets, but he was still chasing a promise made by a boy in a field. Some of his squadron mates told him to let it go, that childhood dreams could not survive in a galaxy at war. But Ethan knew they were wrong. The promise was not just about love, it was about hope. About believing that something good could survive no matter how dark things became. And then, without warning, fate began to move. It started with a strange signal, barely strong enough to register on his ship's sensors. It was weak, old, and almost buried in the static of deep space. But when the computer decrypted the message, Ethan's heart nearly stopped. 3 words appeared on his screen. Help, this is Lyra. The distress signal, the words glowed on the dark screen like a whisper in the void. Help, this is Lyra. Ethan stared at them. His heart beat loud in his ears. For years, he had chased rumors, fragments, and shadows, but this was her voice, not in sound, but in the unmistakable rhythm of her old Earth-style encryption. No one used that code anymore, except her. He played the signal again, letting the faint crackle fill the cockpit. The message repeated once and then cut off with a sharp burst of static. Coordinates flickered briefly in the corner of the transmission. The location was far beyond the patrol zone, in an uncharted region near the remains of an ancient star system. It was deep in enemy-claimed space, a place Fleet Command had marked as dead. No trade, no patrols, no rescue missions. Ethan's hands hovered over the controls. Protocol demanded he report it. Logic told him it could be a trap. Enemy forces had used fake distress calls before. But the pendant at his neck grew warm, almost as if it had its own answer. He remembered her smile, the way she had placed the pendant in his palm, and told him to keep it safe. He didn't need orders. He knew where he was going. When he reported the signal to command, the reply came cold and sharp. Negative, Pilot Ethan, you are to remain on course and ignore unverified sources. They claimed it was likely enemy bait. Not worth risking a fighter and its pilot, but Ethan's mind was already made up. That night, when the squadron powered down for rest, he stayed in his ship, quietly overriding the navigation lock. The hangar doors opened like a silent mouth, swallowing him into the black. The journey was dangerous from the start. Nebula storms swirled in the distance, throwing lightning across the dark. Asteroid fragments drifted without pattern, slamming into one another with the soundless violence of space. Through it all, the signal pulsed faintly on his scanner weak. Almost fading, but always ahead, he adjusted his course again and again, chasing it deeper into the dead zone. Days blurred together in the cold of space. He slept in short bursts, eating ration packs while the autopilot carried him forward. Sometimes he thought he saw shadows moving among the stars, too large to be ships, too slow to be meteors. It was as if the dead system was not truly dead, only waiting. Finally, the signal grew stronger, guiding him toward a small blue and gray planet hidden in the shadow of a shattered moon. The moon's surface was broken like glass, massive chunks floating around it. Something violent had happened here long ago. As he descended through the thin atmosphere, his sensors screamed warnings, strange energy spikes, irregular magnetic fields, and a reading that matched exactly to the pendant's unique metal. It was not just reacting, it was calling back, through the fog of the upper clouds. He saw it, a crashed research vessel, half buried in the sand. Its hull was marked with scorch burns, and strange black vines, almost metallic, had wrapped themselves around the ship. The beacon lights still blinked faintly. Inside the cockpit, Ethan's hands tightened around the controls. He had found her. Or at least the place where her last message had come from. But in the stillness of the ruined planet, he couldn't shake the feeling that something else was watching him. Something that had been waiting for a long, long time. The alien prison. Ethan's boots crunched against the glassy sand as he stepped out of his ship. The air was thin, but breathable, carrying a faint metallic taste. Above him, the shattered moon hung like a broken crown, its fragments glinting in the pale light. The crashed research vessel lay ahead, silent and lifeless. Wrapped in those strange black metallic vines, they pulsed faintly, as if something alive was sleeping inside them. He approached the hull slowly, scanning for movement. The entry hatch was torn open, not by an explosion, but as if something had peeled it back with impossible strength. Inside, the corridors were dark and cold, with frost clinging to the walls. Old tools floated lazily in the low gravity, drifting past broken screens that still flickered with dead data. Then he saw it, a trail, faint footprints in the thin layer of dust, leading deeper into the wreck. They were too small for the alien enemies he had fought in the war. They were human. Ethan followed them, each step echoing in the hollow silence. The trail ended at a collapsed section of the ship, where the floor had been torn open to reveal a tunnel descending into the ground. The metallic vines were thicker here, curling downward like roots reaching into the planet's heart. With one last look at the dim light above, he climbed down. The tunnel walls hummed with a low vibration, almost like a giant heartbeat. His visor readings were confused. Gravity shifted slightly. The air pressure changed, and faint bursts of unknown energy made the display glitch. At the bottom, the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. In the center stood a stasis pod, its glass glowing faintly blue. Inside, her hair drifting in the suspension fluid, was Lyra. Her face was calm, almost peaceful, but there was no mistaking her. It was her. Ethan stepped forward, his hand reaching for the control panel. A deep, resonant voice filled the chamber. "Do not touch her, human." Ethan spun around, his hand going to his sidearm. From the shadows emerged a towering figure, not flesh, not fully machine, but something between. Its body shimmered with shifting symbols, as though the alien language was alive upon its skin. It had no eyes, yet Ethan felt its gaze like a weight pressing into his mind. "This one carries the key," the being said, its voice vibrating through the floor. "She is bound to the heart of the gate, and she will not leave until her purpose is fulfilled." Ethan's fingers tightened on his weapon. "I'm taking her with me," he said, his voice low. The alien's head tilted, as if curious. "You carry a shard," it replied. The pendant at Ethan's neck grew hot, glowing faintly. He realized the markings on the alien's body matched the symbols on the pendant. The being stepped closer, its presence bending the air. "Return the shard, and you may leave unharmed," it said. Ethan shook his head. "This isn't yours anymore," he replied. The alien's body shifted, its arms elongating into bladed shapes. "If you take her, human, you take the war that sleeps with her." In that moment, Ethan understood Lyra was not just a prisoner. She was part of something much bigger, something the alien ruins had been guarding for centuries, but he didn't care about destiny or prophecy. He had made a promise, and nothing in the galaxy was going to stop him from keeping it. The escape. The alien construct moved first. Its blade-like arms sliced through the air, glowing with sharp lines of energy. Ethan ducked, the strike missing him by inches. The sound was like metal tearing through stone. His heart pounded, every muscle screaming to move. He rolled across the floor, firing his sidearm. The shots hit the alien's armor but only made the glowing symbols pulse brighter. It advanced without slowing, its voice calm. "You cannot fight the gatekeeper, human." Ethan ignored it, diving toward the stasis pod. He slammed his palm against the control panel, forcing an emergency release. Alarms screamed, blue liquid, draining rapidly as the glass cracked open. Lyra collapsed into his arms, coughing weakly, her eyes fluttering open. "Ethan," she whispered, voice hoarse. "No time," he said, lifting her. The alien roared, not in pain, but in fury, and the chamber shook. Metallic vines along the walls writhed like snakes, snapping toward them. Ethan fired at the ceiling, blasting loose debris to block the vines. He sprinted toward the tunnel, carrying Lyra. The pendant on his chest burned hot, and the vines hesitated whenever it faced them. He realized the shard was not just a key, it was a weapon. With his free hand, he ripped it from his neck and held it up. A beam of light burst from the markings, forcing the vines to recoil. They climbed the tunnel as the alien's voice echoed below. "You are opening a door you cannot close, human." Ethan gritted his teeth. "Then I'll kick it down before they come through," he muttered, breaking into the ruined ship's corridor. He could hear movement all around. Shapes slid through the shadows, drones, hundreds of them, their eyes burning red. Lyra was weak but conscious now, clinging to his shoulder. "They'll follow us to your ship," she warned. "Then we'll make sure they can't," he said. He slapped a thermal charge on the corridor wall. The explosion ripped through the wreck, sending fire and debris crashing into the advancing drones. They ran through the smoke, emerging into the pale light of the planet's surface. The black vines were rising from the ground now, reaching toward the sky like claws. Ethan shoved Lyra into the cockpit and jumped in after her. The ship's engines roared to life, dust spiraling as they lifted off. Vines lashed at the hull, scraping deep scars across the metal. He pushed the throttle to maximum, the horizon blurring as they broke through the atmosphere. But the danger wasn't over. On his sensors, massive shapes detached from the shattered moon alien ships. Sleek and predatory. "They're coming," Lyra said, fear in her voice. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Let them try," he replied, fingers flying across the controls. The ship dove between drifting moon fragments, weaving through debris at deadly speed. Behind them, the alien ships followed, but Ethan's years as a fleet interceptor pilot gave him the edge. Finally, as they cleared the last field of wreckage, he armed the last of his charges and ejected it into the drifting moon pieces. The detonation lit the void like a second sun, sending shockwaves through the alien formation. By the time the glare faded, Ethan and Lyra were gone, vanishing into the black. In the silence of the cockpit, she looked at him with tired eyes. "You shouldn't have come for me," she whispered. "I told you I would," he said, glancing at the pendant in his hand, "and I keep my promises." The truth and the ring. The stars outside the cockpit drifted slowly as the ship slipped into silent space. For the first time since they left the planet, Ethan allowed himself to breathe. Lyra sat beside him, wrapped in a survival blanket, her hair still damp from the stasis fluid. Her eyes were tired, but there was a spark in them, a spark he remembered from the summer fields of his childhood. He set the autopilot and turned to face her. "I need to know what happened," he said, his voice steady but low. Lyra nodded, taking a slow breath. "My family was close to unlocking the heart of the gate," she began. "It's an ancient device hidden in the ruins. It can open and control wormholes. Anywhere, anytime." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "That's why they took you," he guessed. She nodded again. "The gatekeepers, those machines down there, they've been guarding it for centuries. Maybe longer. They think humans shouldn't have it. My parents refused to tell them how the device worked, so they were killed. I was the last one who knew the coordinates." Her voice cracked for a moment, but she kept going. "I sent signals for years, hiding them inside old Earth codes, hoping someone would hear me." Ethan smiled faintly. "And I did," he said. She looked at him, with a mix of disbelief and wonder. "You crossed into dead space. Just for me." Ethan reached into his jacket without answering. From inside, he pulled a small black box. Lyra's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a simple silver ring. It wasn't ornate or expensive, but it gleamed like a promise that had survived the darkness of years. "I told you I'd come back," Ethan said quietly. Her eyes filled with tears. "You remembered," she whispered. "I remembered everything," he replied. "This ring. I saved every credit I could for it. It's made from earth-forged silver. From the old mines before humanity left the homeworld." He took her hand, slipping the ring onto her finger. For a moment, the war, the aliens, and the gate all felt far away. It was just them, under a sky of endless stars. But reality returned quickly. "We can't go straight back to the fleet," Lyra warned. "They'll follow us. The gatekeepers never let their prisoners go." Ethan glanced at the controls. "Then we don't run from them," he said. "We use what they're afraid of." Lyra's eyes widened as she understood. "You want to activate the gate," she said. Ethan nodded. "If this thing can open wormholes, we can take the fight to them. On our terms." She hesitated, looking at the pendant that still lay in his palm. "That shard is part of the heart, Ethan," she said softly. "If we use it, we can't undo what happens next." He closed his fingers around it. "Then we make it count." They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the ship filling the air. Outside, a cluster of stars shimmered faintly, one of them hiding the ruins of the heart. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "We're going to end this war," he said, And when it's over, we'll have that life we talked about. She smiled through the tears. I believe you, she whispered. Humanity's hope. The wormhole device sat deep inside the alien ruins. It was not a single machine, but an entire chamber carved from living metal. Its walls shifted like liquid, forming patterns that pulsed in rhythm with the shard in Ethan's hand. The air hummed with an ancient power, a feeling that this place had been waiting for centuries. Ethan and Lyra stood at the center platform, the shard glowing between them. Once we start this, Lyra said, her voice firm, there's no stopping it. Ethan nodded. That's the point. He stepped forward, pressing the shard into a hollow slot in the control pillar. The entire chamber came alive, light poured through the walls. And the floor trembled as rings of energy began spinning in the air above. Outside, the ground split open, revealing a swirling portal that stretched far beyond the stars. From the edges of the horizon, alien ships appeared, their sleek shapes cutting through the air like blades. The gatekeepers had come to stop them. Ethan activated his comms, sending a signal across human channels. This is Captain Ethan Hayes. Coordinates incoming. The gate is open. Hit them with everything you've got. Moments later, the first human fleet emerged from the wormhole, their ships blazing with engine light. For the first time in the war, humanity was not running. They were striking back. The battle exploded in the skies. Human and alien ships clashed above the ruins, plasma fire streaking through the clouds. Ethan and Lyra stayed on the platform, guiding the gate's energy to open multiple wormholes. Reinforcements poured in from distant colonies. It was humanity's full strength, united in one place. The alien forces fought with fury, but they were unprepared for a war fought across wormholes. Human ships vanished from one battlefield and reappeared behind enemy lines, striking from every angle. Lyra's hands moved over the alien controls, her mind in perfect sync with the device. The heart is responding, she said. It's not just opening wormholes, it's learning from us. Ethan smiled. Then let's teach it how humans fight. Hours later, the last of the gatekeeper ships fell from the sky, their wreckage burning across the plains. The battlefield went silent except for the hum of the heart. Lyra removed the shard, and the portal slowly collapsed into nothing but a faint shimmer. The war was over, or as close to over as it had ever been. In the weeks that followed, humanity celebrated across the colonies. Ethan and Lyra became symbols of what it meant to keep a promise. They weren't just the pilot and the scientist who ended the war, they were proof that even in the cold emptiness of space, hope could survive. One quiet night, far from the crowds, they stood on a peaceful colony world. The stars above were bright, no longer hidden by the shadows of war. Ethan took Lyra's hand, feeling the ring still warm from her touch. We made it, he said softly. She smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. You kept your promise, she whispered. He looked up at the sky, the same sky they had once shared as children. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel endless and lonely, it felt like home.